Hello, everybody. Welcome into another edition of Go with the Flow, presented by R.S. Andrews. My name is Brandon Adams. Excited to look at the upcoming week's worth of games from a point spread perspective and see if we can pick some winners. And glad to have Georgia back after last week's show, in which we picked the games involving the rest of college football, with UGA taking the Saturday off. They will travel to Kentucky to take on the Wildcats on Saturday. We'll have that and the rest of the college football slate. Dari, how are you feeling about this week's games?
Feeling pretty good, still, treading through the SEC. But I think, like you said, there's a lot of zigzag, and today I'm gonna do some zigzags kind of against the grain and see if I can mix it up and get on a really strong performance. So I'm looking for that this week.
I should point out that's Dari Payro from R.S. Andrews. We welcome him into the show each and every week. And for those who've never seen the show before, what Dari does is decide which of our picks he likes. All the Dog Nation team, myself, Mike Griffith, Jeff Sindell, Connor Riley, the Dog Nation daily listeners and viewers, we all lay out our thoughts in the upcoming week's worth of games. That creates a consensus. And Dari decides if he wants to go with the flow and join that, or if he wants to go against the grain, if you will, and make some other picks. As far as how we've been doing thus far this year, before we update you on this week's games, let's also give you an update on that. One of the real stories right now is the performance of Dog Nation's Jeff Sindell. After a 6-2 week a week ago, he now sits on top of the standings for the year at 23-16, which actually ties him with the Dog Nation daily listeners and viewers, also at 23-16 after a 5-3 week. And really 5-3 was the predominant performance from a week ago. Mike Griffith next, 22-17 on the year after a 5-3 week. Dari Payro, 19-20 on the year after another 5-3 week. That puts me just behind Dari right now. I'm at 17-22 on the year, 4-4 for me a week ago. Connor Riley, though, who is still in the rear for the moment, but also put together a winning week last week at 5-3 to put him at 16-23 on the season. So maybe last week an opportunity to take advantage of some games that I wasn't able to do. The rest of the folks seem to be able to do that, but that just puts more of a spotlight on what's able to happen this week. With that in mind, we'll get ready to begin with the Dogs going to Kentucky on Saturday. They will play in this game as 15-point road favorites in a game that was originally slated to take place last Saturday, but got moved to Halloween due to the coronavirus outbreak at Florida. Now Georgia looks to bounce back after a loss in its last game 2 weeks ago to the Alabama Crimson Tide. With that in mind, Mike Griffith, let us know your thoughts. Georgia on the road in Lexington to the Wildcats, favored by 15 points. Mike, take it away.
I'm going to take Georgia to win this game because Kentucky doesn't have any offense, and Georgia is going to try to run the score up. So I'm going to say Georgia 34, Kentucky 10.
So Mike Griffith takes the Georgia Bulldogs there to bounce back against the Kentucky Wildcats. He likes them minus the points. Jeff Sindell, what about you?
I can't see any scenario where Kentucky gets more than 7 to 10 points. I think Georgia will get around 30, 35, something like that. This feels like a 21 to 28 point win, which will definitely handle that point spread.
So Jeff Sindell also on Georgia on that one. Clean sweep from our scribes thus far. Connor Riley, do you want to join them in taking UGA?
If Kentucky could somehow score negative points this week, I think that'd be in play for them. This offense is bad. This Georgia defense is really good. I like Georgia to comfortably cover the 15-point spread here.
So Connor takes UGA, Dog Nation daily listeners and viewers. They are also heavy on the Dogs this week to the tune of 86% on UGA for this one. And Dari, I'm going to be right here with everybody else on this. And for me, there's a number that jumps out. First of all, before you get to the data, I'm a big believer that styles make fights. I think that Kentucky does some things well, but those things that Kentucky does well play right into the hands of what Georgia wants to do. I think that's one of the reasons why you've seen Georgia win comfortably in Lexington in 2018. Even in the rain a year ago, it was still a shutout win for Georgia, despite not covering the spread. But where the argument is most sensible for UGA is in relation to the recent data, Georgia on the road as a point spread favorite. In the last 10 instances, Georgia's been 7-3 on the road when favored against the spread. They've also been on quite a streak lately, though. The only recent loss was the first game of the season against Arkansas, where Georgia did fail to cover the 28-point number, but still won the game 37-10, came within a point of covering in a game in which Georgia looked awful in the first half. So even in that game, Georgia still came within a point of covering on the road and a big number there. Prior to that, Georgia had covered its last 5 games on the road as a favorite. Last time prior to all of that, the Georgia did not cover on the road when favored. You have to go all the way back to LSU in 2018. So Georgia's had no problem with spreads on the road recently. I think that speaks to what's going to happen on Saturday. It's a lot of points. 15 is not a small number, but Kentucky's also not very good. So from that standpoint, easy for me to understand why it's a clean sweep on UGA thus far. Dar, you've been pretty confident in Georgia as of late. You want to go with the flow here and take the dogs.
Well, before we do that, we're going to get back to the winning ways. And
There
we're
you
going to
go.
get a little ice cold beverage here.
There you go.
Got a little beverage on the keypad here. Hopefully it doesn't short circuit this laptop. I love Georgia in this game, Brandon. Let me tell you why. Georgia has defeated Auburn, Arkansas, and Tennessee all by 21 points or more. That's going to continue this weekend. Kentucky doesn't have the offense. Georgia's defense is going to really shut them down. And I really think there's a really good prop bet out there. I didn't get a chance to look this up, but if there's odds on a shutout in this game, I would be all about putting a little wager on that.
Yeah, it's interesting to hear you say that. Connor Riley also predicted a shutout for Georgia. Georgia did shut out Kentucky a year ago. So I think that's a kind of an interesting way to look at this, to really get aggressive here and take Georgia to hold Kentucky scoreless. That could be something worth watching on Saturday as the dogs try to bounce back after a bad performance against Alabama. Kentucky nowhere near as much firepower. Dari, I guess it should be pointed out that Wildcats could be starting Joey Gatewood, the former Auburn quarterback, as their starter on Saturday. It seems likely here during the middle of the week that's what Kentucky is going to do. But ultimately, that outlook doesn't change the final result for me really at all. Gatewood's probably better than Terry Wilson, their other quarterback, but not enough to change my feelings on this game really at all.
Yeah, and I think that what that smells like is turnovers. More turnovers, defensive scores for Georgia. I really like Georgia in this game.
That's a fun thing to think about. And we're off and running here on Go with the Flow, presented by R.S. Andrews. And much the same way we talk about going with the flow on picks and forming a consensus, R.S. Andrews can help keep the things flowing in your home the way they're supposed to, whether it be air conditioning coming out of your vents. I will tell you, our air conditioning has been working still pretty heavy overdrive over the course of the last few days. It has been pretty warm here for late October, so we're still cranking up that AC. I can't sleep without it. Dari, I'm sure you probably are seeing some folks that still want to make sure that air conditioning is ready to go here because it ain't quite winter yet. And when it's almost 80 degrees during the day, air conditionings are still working. So making sure that system gets tuned back up to factory fresh specs, that's still really important right now, isn't it?
Oh, yeah. I mean, it's still, we're getting in the high 70s, 80s. You got a little humidity. Definitely need to get the ACs. We get a lot of no cool calls still coming in right now. But definitely want to make sure that they're working properly as well as getting ready for the fall season.
That's exactly right. So if you're worried about your furnace, your heating system not coming and working for the winter that's on its way, get some peace of mind on that as well. Please find our friends at R.S. Andrews online at rsandrews.com. With that said, we'll turn our attention to the other action within the SEC, including LSU going to Auburn. This has been a series in which the road team has had really some significant struggles. Auburn has not won at LSU since 1999, but has fared better when playing games at Jordan-Hare Stadium, the site of this Saturday's game. For instance, Auburn's won 3 of the last 5 when playing at home. So a little more success there at Jordan-Hare Stadium. Of course, for Auburn, another win last Saturday, marred by a controversial officiating decision. For LSU, a relatively comfortable win against South Carolina, and an eye-opening performance by TJ Finley, the true freshman quarterback. This is one of those rivalries in the SEC West that's circled every single season, and it remains important for both these teams again. When you think about the point spread on all of this, after 2 consecutive Saturdays where Auburn was a 3-point road favorite, they now return home as a 3-point home underdog. They'll host the LSU Tigers on Saturday. With that in mind, Mike Griffith, your thoughts on Auburn getting 3 points at home against LSU?
LSU just athletically overwhelmed South Carolina last week. I don't think they can do that against Auburn. And LSU just seems like a program, seems very undisciplined. I'm going to take LSU to win, but Auburn to cover. Let's say LSU 21, Auburn 20.
So Mike Griffith takes Auburn there. Jeff Sintel, how about your thoughts on LSU and Auburn? Why don't you give us your opinion?
I think I like LSU in this one. I don't know what they're doing with Miles Brennan or what they're doing with TJ Finley, the true freshman who looked okay throwing about 50 slant routes last week against South Carolina. I just think, Auburn's skirt is really blown up about how great Tank Bigsby is, and he's a good dude. He's a great dude. He's got a freshman All-American all over him. But I think about LSU and the flashes that they're going to get from guys like Elias Ricks, Arik Gilbert, Ty Davis, TJ Finley, great receiver like Keyshawn Butte, playing a lot better each week. I just see a lot more pieces. Let me throw Ty Davis, John Emery in there as well. Make sure I got those names. I think LSU still has more dudes. I don't know where Auburn is at. If you're going to tell me Auburn gets another curious call in this one, that means the difference of 7 points. I think that might change my opinion, but I think that can't happen again, even in 2020. That's why I like LSU on the road, covering this spread and winning by about 10 to 15 points going away.
So Jeff takes LSU in this Battle of the Tigers. Connor, Riley, your turn to weigh in.
You see, Jeff, that's where you're wrong. Auburn is going to get another dubious call this week. They're going to get a ball that shouldn't bounce their way that should, and that's why they're not only going to cover this week, they're going to win outright at home against LSU.
So it is Auburn for Connor Riley. Dog Nation Daily listeners and viewers on the other side of this, 69% do take LSU to cover that spread here in this one. This is another one of those instances, as I said before, where it's been a home team series a little bit. LSU winning straight up in every one of its home games going back to 1999. Auburn not always winning outright against LSU, but doing pretty well against the spread. They've covered 4 of the last 5 games in this series played at Jordan-Hare Stadium. And I know that Auburn's been kind of the punching bag for a lot of SEC fans this week because of what looked like an unfair call on what should have potentially been a turnover on a kickoff a week ago. We all remember the Arkansas game. There was some controversy surrounding the Kentucky game there as well. But, Dari, one of the strategies that has worked for me a little bit this season, certainly worked last week, was being slow to completely give up on Auburn, especially when you think about on the other side of this, LSU with TJ Finley. Good performance from him at Death Valley. Very different, though, to play a game on the road, even if it's not, 80-something thousand people at Jordan-Hare. It's just hard for a true freshman to match that performance week over week. I actually like Auburn here in this one. I'm going to go with the Tigers. With that in mind, that puts the flow actually by a slight degree on the side of Auburn there as well. Do you want to go with the flow and take Auburn?
I think that before I get to that, I think the actually open as Auburn as a favorite is -1 and instantly moved to LSU -3. So a ton of big money or smart money or sharp money, however, whatever you want to call it, has kind of come in on LSU right out the gates. That's something to note. If Miles Brennan, may or may not play, Saturday, and I think that's a big deal. Like you said, I mean, the freshman was good last week. Finley, it's much different going on the road, facing Auburn's defense. And since this is 2020, Brandon, I want to throw you a curveball.
Please.
If Brennan starts for LSU, I want to take LSU.
Okay.
And if Finley starts, I'm going to take Auburn.
Wow.
Is that allowed?
Sure. We'll let you do that. Why not? Why not?
Done.
We'll let you do that.
All right. Perfect.
This is one of those things for me where I thought Auburn was the better team to begin the year. And I think that we get clouded with a bunch of data over the course of a season. But for me, before the season starts, I had LSU as the better team here. So in a matchup where the point spread's fairly narrow, where, the winner is almost more, at least fairly likely to cover, I got to stick with my guns on this. I just thought Auburn was the better team before the season began.
Yeah, I mean, this game, I think, is going to be a battle. I think it'll be a close game, and Brennan just gives LSU a better chance with his leadership in this situation. And I really don't like LSU in this type of game against Auburn that's trying to scrap and put their season back together. So that's kind of where I'm at. It really depends on the quarterback because I think it's going to be a tight game.
I'm not a doctor by any stretch, but I don't think Miles Brennan's playing on Saturday, though. I mean,
he's probably not. He's probably not. I think it's iffy at best. So really, I'll take Auburn. And the points as a home dog here with a little caveat asterisk. If Brennan is out there and healthy and he plays to start the game, then we'll flip that pick.
I understand that. The next game we're going to pick is actually the game that I like probably more than any other for our week, and maybe as much as I've liked anything in recent weeks on our show. It's Ole Miss, fresh off a disappointing situation for them against Auburn, going on the road to Vanderbilt. They will play in this game as 18-point 18-point road favorites against Vanderbilt. Commodores not good on the field very much this season, also struggling to even get back to football after a little bit of a coronavirus outbreak, but they do return to Nashville on Saturday. With that in mind, Mike Griffith, give us your thoughts here on Ole Miss going to Vanderbilt, how you think this thing plays out. Mike Griffith, take it away.
I've said I wasn't sure if Vanderbilt can finish the season, and I'm serious. And I just, if you're, I don't even know what you're playing for if you're at Vanderbilt right now. Ole Miss 41 covers the spread, 41-20 over Vandy.
So Mike on the side of Ole Miss there. Jeff Sintel, you lead in our contest in our season-long standings. Your thoughts on the Rebels and the Commodores?
Ole Miss, I think Lane Kiffin will try to manufacture this point spread in pennies. I think you'll only need about 2,500 pennies to cover this point spread. I think Ole Miss is going to win this one by about 17 points.
So it is all Ole Miss for Jeff Sintel too. Connor Riley, how about you?
I've picked Vanderbilt the first 3 weeks to cover. I'm not being that stupid again. Ole Miss will try and score a ton of points to show that they're back or whatever, and they'll score enough on Vanderbilt to win and cover that 18-point spread.
So it's all Ole Miss all the time right now. Dog Nation daily listeners and viewers, they also agree to the tune of 71% on the side of the Rebels. And Dari, as I predicted and alluded to a moment ago, this is the game right now that I probably like as much as anything. And I think this may be one of those real, true pieces of actionable intelligence that when you get a chance to go against Vanderbilt at home right now, I think you have to do it. And there's a reason why I'm kind of carving out a home game as an exception in comparison to Vanderbilt going on the road. When Vanderbilt goes on the road, you're going to see gigantic point spreads because people know Vanderbilt's not very good. At home, there is still kind of a natural tendency to want to show a little respect for a team that has to go on the road. But the numbers kind of back this up, though. You look at 6 of the last 7 times when Vanderbilt has been more than a 10-point underdog at home, they failed to cover the spread. I'll remind you, they got blown out in this spot against South Carolina just a couple of weeks ago. I have a sneaking suspicion that Vanderbilt has nothing to play for. They're totally giving up on the season. And when you have a relatively small number, and for a team that can score like Ole Miss can, 18 points here is not all that small of a number. In fact, in some cases it may actually even be coming down a little bit from that, but we'll work off 18 here. That is not a huge number for Ole Miss to eclipse against Vanderbilt. Rebels have their problems, but Vanderbilt's the worst team in the league by a wide margin. I love Ole Miss in this spot, and that actually puts clean sweep on the side of the Rebels. You want to go with the flow and take Ole Miss.
Yeah, I'm gonna break out the broom and continue with that clean sweep. 18 points is a lot, for a team that's 1-4 to cover on the road. But I just don't see how I can back a Vandy team that is just so bad. I mean, they're 97th ranked in scoring offense. Those numbers are going to improve because, Ole Miss's defense is so bad. But I don't think it's enough for them to really make up ground. And I think Kiffin's going to try to run up some points here because he knows this is a good window of opportunity for him to do that.
Yeah, my theory here is there are 13 SEC teams right now in Vanderbilt that also has to play an SEC schedule. I think the gap between Vanderbilt and the rest of the league is that wide right now. And, I'm not necessarily automatically going against Vanderbilt when they are on the road because you're going to see some 35-point numbers, some things like that. That at a certain point gets to be a little too much. But this price is not too much for me to pay, minus the 18 here for Ole Miss. I'm actually pretty excited about that all the way around. Speaking of 30-plus point numbers, that is where we go next in what I believe is, and Dar, you may know this better than I do, I believe geographically, these are the 2 closest teams in the SEC. Just down 59 south from Tuscaloosa is Starkville. Short trip for the Mississippi State Bulldogs going to Alabama. Alabama, of course, fresh off a couple of rivalry wins, beating Georgia 2 weeks ago and a victory in the 3rd Saturday in October rivalry against Tennessee last week, which was obviously played on the 4th Saturday in October. They now host Mike Leach and the Bulldogs, expected to be without running back Kylan Hill. And the Bulldogs here are 30.5-point underdogs. Mike Griffith, your thoughts on Alabama and Mississippi State. Go ahead.
Alabama will continue to put the throttle to the floor. Mississippi State's too close for comfort in terms of their geographical proximity. Alabama wins 56-10, covers easily.
All right, so Mike Griffith on Alabama here. Jeff Sintel, how about you?
Yeah, I don't think this is an easy cover at all. I think Alabama's going to try to figure out what they are now with developing, their new third, fourth receiver guys without the explosive Jalen Waddle in there. I think this will be a cover, but I think Alabama will have to lean on some new pieces, maybe more Slade Bolden, maybe more new young wide receivers. I think this is probably going to be about a 30 to 35 point game. I think Alabama still gets it done. Just depends on how much they use Najee Harris and also how good Bryce Young looks in the third and fourth quarter. I don't think Professor Saban will keep Mac Jones out there longer than usual in this one.
Jeff Sintel also on the side of Alabama here. Connor Riley, your thoughts on the Crimson Tide as a 30.5 point favorite against the Bulldogs?
30 points is just too many for me. I'll risk the biscuit here and take Mississippi State. I know Mike Leach wants to try and throw the ball around and try and make things happen there. So I'll bank on him getting two or three easy touchdowns that way late. 30 is just too many for me. I'll take Mississippi State here.
So Connor going against the grain there by taking Mississippi State. Dog Nation Daily listeners and viewers, they do not agree with that. 91% here on Alabama. And Dari, the pick I had last week that I regretted more than any other was going against Alabama against Tennessee. In retrospect, that was just not a huge number for the Tide to have to cover. And yet here I am finding myself in a spot this week where I'm going to go against Alabama again. This time, though, I do feel like I've got a little bit more evidence on my side. Alabama as a 30-plus point favorite has not been an automatic by any stretch of the imagination. You're going to go back and look at the last 30 instances for Alabama when favored by more than 30. And a lot of this has been in SEC play dating back to near the end of the 2012 season. They're just 11-19 against the spread in those instances. They never lose to unranked opponents. They are a very, very sure cover in that range from, say, about 2 touchdowns to 3 touchdowns. What they faced last week, they've been, pretty brilliant when it comes to covering the spread. But against a huge number like this, you are just kind of playing the percentages a little bit. And the percentages would say here that maybe Mississippi State can score enough late to at least make this a little closer than the experts think. I'm going to probably get bludgeoned for doing this, but I'm going to go against the flow. I'm sorry. I'm going to take Mississippi State, which kind of goes against the flow of what some of our folks have already taken. But I'm going to ask you if you still want to go with the flow and take Alabama, understanding all of that.
Well, Brandon, I think the better play for this game is taking Alabama in the first half. Like you said, it's a lot of points. And, for me, since it's 2020, this isn't really just always bet on Bama. So I'm going to go against the grain, and I'm going to be zigging and zagging kind of off the norm and off my playbook on this one. And I'm going to take Mississippi State. Mississippi State's had 2 weeks off, plenty of time to prepare for this game, plenty of time to get the offense right, which hasn't been looking good. But what's been overlooked with, Mississippi State losing games is how well their defense has actually played. Mm-hmm. They're probably one of the better defenses in the SEC, not too far behind Georgia. And I think this game gets a little tricky because Saban is probably going to pull his starters in the fourth quarter and maybe even in the third quarter in this game because he's going to have a lead. And that's going to open the door for Mississippi State to cover, some mistakes to be played, mistakes, by Alabama. I think Alabama covering the first half is, probably the better play in this game. And I think that spread's moving up to, I think it may be like 32 right now. So yeah. And then you also have the fact that, he had an injury with Waddle. A lot of people are saying, hey, this doesn't really affect him because the offense is so explosive. But it does. I think that's in the back of his head. He doesn't want to lose anybody. He's not going to want to play him as much. And I think when you lose a player like that, that is very impactful no matter how good or how deep you are.
So I'm curious about this. I like your idea of Alabama in the first half. However, I will point out that in recent years, when we've seen these very high-powered Alabama offenses, it's almost like Vegas and the offshore books have kind of caught up to the notion of Bama in the first half, making that first half number almost the same as the end of game number because of just how dominant Alabama can be. So I would caution people that while I think that Dari's point about a first half number is a pretty good thing to look at, be careful if you're essentially getting the same price for the first half as you're getting for the full game. That can be kind of a tough number. Where would the first half number, and admittedly, I don't know what it is for this game against Mississippi State, but where would the first half number have to be, Dari, for you to be interested in it?
Oh, I mean, I like 20.5.
Yeah.
I think under 21, I haven't looked at it. I haven't had a chance to look up that first half line. It's definitely going to be higher than half the points. But I think anything less than 21 is a good bet in that first half.
Yeah, I think it's worth following that and seeing where it goes. And this is one of those things where, look, the books love to stay ahead of customers, and this is one of those examples where they try to do that, where in many cases they see the same logic that we do of, okay, we don't know if Alabama stays motivated for the full 60, but we know they come out, with the pedal to the metal, and that's one of those things where the book also tries to catch up with that logic a little bit as well sometimes.
Yep.
All right, so that's fun to think about. Alabama against Mississippi State. Let's also now take a look at a game that, if you're used to this being a neutral site contest, that's not the situation this year. College Station, Texas is the venue for Texas A&M hosting Arkansas. Arkansas, one of the surprise teams in the SEC thus far this year, finding their way to 2-2 on the relatively young campaign, when a lot of folks thought they might be winless. For Texas A&M, weathering an early storm, ugly start to the year against Vanderbilt, bad loss, ugly in terms of getting blown out by Alabama, pulling the upset against Florida, and then all of a sudden now the schedule really opens up for the Aggies here. They do host Arkansas on Saturday as 12.5-point favorites. Mike Griffith, your thoughts here on the Aggies and the Razorbacks, how you expect this one to go down?
This pains me because I think everybody really likes what Sam Pittman's doing. At Texas A&M, boy, that's tough. A&M's got some momentum. I'm really on the fence on this one. I guess you can tell. This would be one in real life I wouldn't touch with a 10-foot pole. But since we have to do this exercise, I will take Texas A&M to cover at home 34-21.
So Mike deliberates for a moment, but takes Texas A&M there on that one. Jeff Sintel, your thoughts about the Aggies and the Hogs?
I don't think the jukebox will be turned on after this one, but I think it will be a very hard-fought game. I think this is a one-score game. I think Texas A&M is going to win it, but I don't see them covering that spread. I believe this is another line this week that keeps shrinking. I see this as a 7 to 10-point win for Texas A&M.
So it is Arkansas for Jeff Sintel. Connor Riley, how about you?
I only like this game because of the line. 12.5 is a very weird number you don't see very often. And so because of that, because it's a 12.5 and not even 13 or 14, I will take Texas A&M here at that number.
Connor coming around a little bit on Texas A&M. He'll take them there in that spot. How about Dog Nation Daily listeners and viewers? Obviously still some love for them, for Sam Pittman. It's 58% taking Arkansas here, plus the 12.5 there in that spot. And, Dari, this is one for me where if you go back and listen to a lot of things I've said about Arkansas thus far this season, I have been on them and done well by picking Arkansas. I really even loved them before the year began as a potential surprise team. Their Vegas over-under number originally, looking at a 12-game schedule, was 4.5. I thought they had a chance to meet that number. However, in a 10-game only schedule, they're now 2-2. There comes a point when someone who's liked Pittman, who's liked Arkansas, where it's smart to sell high. This is my sell high moment on Arkansas. I've gotten some benefit out of taking Arkansas. I don't think this is a good spot for them on Saturday. I think A&M is the better team. I think at some point in time, if you're Arkansas, your luck, I'm not saying it's been luck that's enabled them the last couple of weeks, is really they should have been 3-1 on the basis of officiating. They got some bad luck. But I just think at a certain point in time, a team that was only supposed to win 4 on a 12-game schedule, being 3-2 thus far on what has been a 5-game SEC-only schedule, that's just asking too much. I don't think Arkansas can stay with Texas A&M on Saturday. I believe the Aggies win this game by at least 2 touchdowns, and Texas A&M continues to build towards some momentum for what could be a really big, the potential of even a 9-1 type finish for them to close out the year. So with that in mind, I take the Aggies. That puts the flow on the side of Texas A&M. Do you want to go with the flow and take the home favorite here?
Man, this is a tough game to pick with a tough line on here. At 12.5, that a lot of things can happen around there. It's to me a fishy line. But A&M have some momentum. They probably have the loudest stadium in College Station right now in college football with all the COVID restrictions. Uh, you know, but I'm gonna go against the flow. I'm gonna give Pittman some credit, and I'm gonna take the Hogs here. I think they can stay competitive in the game. I think they can keep it close. This game is all about third downs, Brandon. Arkansas is 17th in the nation in third down defense, and Texas A&M is fifth in the nation in third down offense conversions. So that's something to keep an eye on, and that's really where the game's going to be won or lost is on third down.
That's a great stat. Really interesting zeroing in on what's really going to decide that game on Saturday. Really fun to think. But there's also a little bit of bad blood between these two teams right now because, as I said before, the fact that this is normally played in a neutral site, going to College Station this year, I think there are a lot of parties who hope this becomes an on-campus rivalry again. But Jerry Jones, the Cowboys owner, former Arkansas letterman, pushing to get this game back at Jerry World again next season. So there's a little bit of rivalry juice between these two teams.
Yeah, no doubt. You got that bad blood rivalry. And just a note, I did look it up. So the first half line in that Alabama Mississippi State game is 18.
Wow.
So I like that. I like taking Alabama there to cover that first half.
Dari, I think you may be onto something with that. I think that's pretty interesting. And not to backtrack too much, but we should point out that for someone who in our first year of doing this, and we even joked about this a little bit last week again, made a point to never pick against Alabama. When it comes to the end of game line, you have gone against the tide now twice this year. Pretty interesting that in a year like 2020, where everything's so different, people have to be ready to kind of roll with the punches, whatever they might be, right?
That's right. Well, actually, this is my third pick against Alabama this year.
Okay.
I took Ole Miss against them, which covered. I took Georgia, which should have covered, and now I'm taking Mississippi State in the points. So definitely, this is a year like no other, and my picks are going to reflect that.
Yeah, no doubt about that. So Dari knows a lot about picking games, but Dari Payer on the entire team at RS. Andrews know a lot about taking good care of you when it comes to air conditioning, heating, plumbing, and electric needs, those systems in your house that really we all just take for granted. But when they go out, you get to be a little bit worried. Listen, RS Andrews, though, is going to end those worries for you because they do some things that are important. They understand something that really matters here. They show up on time. They do the work that's promised for the price that's promised. Those are the kind of things that just make you feel good about doing business with them. So please check them out today at rsandrews.com as Dari gets a little bit of a sip of a beverage there to settle in for the rest of these picks. We hope all of you are kind of enjoying your Friday afternoon, getting ready for a fun college football Saturday. Maybe you're much like Dari is as you play along with us, making your own picks, enjoy a little beverage there and get ready for the start of the weekend. Certainly a team happy to have the weekend back. It's the Florida Gators. After a couple of weeks of not being able to play, not even being able to practice, they are set to host Missouri on Saturday. Missouri's been kind of one of the interesting teams in the SEC. A lot of SEC Coach of the Year love for Sam Pittman, but Eli Drinkwitz for the Tigers is also making a bit of a case here too. They now travel to Florida after pulling the upset last week against Kentucky, small number, but pulling a big upset prior to that against LSU as a 2-touchdown underdog. They themselves, though, 2-touchdown underdogs here. Florida plays as a minus 13.5-point favorite against Missouri on Saturday, and the Gators return to football. With that in mind, Mike Griffiths, give us your thoughts on the game.
Yeah, I'm going to go with Florida to cover. I mean, I think the 2-week break, albeit under unfortunate circumstance, probably got a lot of these kids rested up. And you can play pitch and catch. We've seen that time off doesn't hurt offenses. So I'm going to take the Gators to win this 37-17 over Missouri.
So Mike is on Florida there. Jeff Sintel, how about you?
I like this one to be a high-scoring game. I think Mizzou will benefit from playing a physical team like Kentucky last week. I think Florida won't be used to that physicality when that's a team that was already kind of capable of getting pushed around a little bit anyway. I see this as like much like that LSU Mizzou game, except this time it's on the road for the Tigers. I like a 41-30 type win there for Florida. It's not going to look pretty. They're going to show some rust. So I like Mizzou to cover.
So Jeff, Riverside's Mike, he takes Missouri as the Tigers look to stay hot after really a couple nice performances for them here as of late. Connor Riley, your thoughts on Missouri taking on Florida?
I came in here expecting to pick Florida because of the number, but how can I pick against my namesake? Connor Beasley, the Missouri starting quarterback there, played well last week against Missouri, played great against LSU. It won and covered those last two games, though both of them were at home. But I'm riding with Connor here. Give me Missouri plus the 13.5 points. I'd like this a lot more if we're at 14, but I'm still 13.5 is more than enough for a Connor to get a cover in there.
It is Missouri for Connor Riley as well. Dog Nation Daily audience, of course, they do this. 76% take the Missouri Tigers here. The D&D audience is not ever going to take Florida. I can promise you that. Dari, I like Florida here, and I wish I could find this number. I heard this week on TV. I don't have the number to give you. But one of the things I thought was kind of interesting is when you see teams who are playing their first game against teams that have already played, you would think that there'd be a little bit of an advantage for the teams that have the experience. But thus far, it's really not worked out that way. Teams playing their first game have a decided winning record against teams who've already played thus far this season. That could be a fluke. It could be really nothing to make any big deal about. But it is at least an example of the concern about rust, the concern about not quite being in game shape, not necessarily being that big of an issue. And I think for Florida, much the same way. For people who are worried about the lost practice time or the break between games being something that hampers Florida on Saturday. Listen, I hate the Gators. I'd love nothing more for that to be true. I kind of think it's not. I don't know how much better Florida's gotten defensively over the course of time they've been away. I'm assuming it's probably some better because I'm sure that they wanted to emphasize that during the absence from football. Obviously, Missouri has been pretty good offensively. They really throw the ball a little bit right now. But that's not enough to scare me off taking Florida here, minus this number. I will take Florida. However, the flow is on the side of Missouri by a slight margin. You want to go with the flow and take Missouri here?
No, I'm going to take the Gators here. I think Florida's offense is too much. They're playing at home. They're coming off a few weeks rest, a few weeks to game plan. Even with the COVID issues, I think Florida is just going to rack up some serious points, and it's just going to be too much.
Yeah, I think this is one of those things that, to be candid and not to be disrespectful to some of our colleagues who took Missouri here, I think Missouri's a little bit of a sucker play in this game. Listen, I want Florida to not win, but this is not a huge number to cover at home. The Florida offense has been really good, and the Missouri wins they've racked up as of late are both games that had a fluke schedule element to them. The Missouri-Kentucky date got moved. The LSU-Missouri venue got changed. I'm not saying those are the sole reasons Missouri won those games, but it is fair to point out the recent Missouri success has come in some rather unorthodox scheduling moments.
Yep, definitely. And it definitely is a big reason why they caught LSU off guard. So, I mean, that definitely impacted that game.
All right, before we're done, we'll return our attention back to Georgia and Kentucky. We'll look at the expected point total in that game. We'll make our pick for the over-under. But let's leave the SEC entirely for now. And only one matchup this week involving teams ranked in the top 25. It is in the Big Ten. And it's one of the things that makes you sad for 2020. Normally, this would be Beaver Stadium, probably at night, wide-out crowd, huge impact potential in a game against Ohio State. As it stands now, though, it's Penn State coming off a loss to Indiana last Saturday, and really one of the better games of the weekend. Ohio State dominant in its win against Nebraska, now on the road here as an 11.5-point favorite in State College, PA, against Penn State in what is the marquee non-SEC game of the weekend. So, Mike Griffith, give us your thoughts here on the Buckeyes at the Nittany Lions.
They're going to cover, and I'm going to pick them to win 34-21 over Penn State.
So Mike very succinctly and briefly takes Ohio State there. Jeff Sintel, how about you?
I think Penn State will have somewhat of a summon the troops win and try to make this one very close because really their season is on the line. But I like what Ohio State will do to win this game by more than 14 points. I got the Buckeyes here, and I've got them covering this 11-point spread.
It is Ohio State for Jeff Sintel as well, and I'm guessing Connor Riley might agree. Connor, tell us your thoughts.
Buckeyes, big here. Penn State just doesn't have the dudes offensively to match up with this Ohio State team. I think Justin Fields is going to have another big day on Saturday. And Penn State, you find a way to lose to Indiana, you're going to get your doors blown off by Ohio State the next week. Give me the Buckeyes big here.
So Connor on Ohio State too. Dog Nation Daily listeners and viewers, they also are as well. Massive number here. 93% take the Buckeyes. And, Dari, this is just one of those things where I think I said last week during Dog Nation Daily that I'm not a big believer in Penn State right now. No Micah Parsons is the best player on that team, subtracted. The loss to Indiana only confirms that for me. I think a lot of this Big Ten season really is about Ohio State and its potential pursuit of a national championship. The cancellation of Nebraska, Wisconsin is only further evidence of that this is about getting as many games to the Buckeyes in as possible so they can win, have at least the potential, the chance of winning a national championship. This point spread could be much higher than this, and I still would take Ohio State. I think they're focused to play well in this game. Their schedule eases up in a huge way after this, assuming those games still get played. They will have their full attention on Penn State on Saturday. I don't think the game's going to be pretty. I really like Ohio State here. It's a clean sweep for the Buckeyes. You want to go with the flow and take Ohio State?
Well, I mean, this is Ohio State's only test until Michigan at the end of the year. It's a lot of points on the road, and everything points to Ohio State continuing to win big. But this is where I'm going to zig on the zag, and I'm going against the grain. I'm taking Penn State in the points. And just so everyone knows, I am undefeated in my Big Ten picks so far this season. Clean sweep over the weekend. Penn State has a pretty good secondary. I think their defense is pretty good. Ohio State didn't look that good, even though they scored 52 points or whatever they scored on Nebraska. There was a lot of moments in that game where it didn't flow, and the leading rusher on the team was Fields. Okay, so he was making a lot of plays with his legs and running around and moving chains, and that's what he does, but he was doing that a lot. They don't have J.K. Dobbins anymore. I think that's a big key for Penn State. If they want to keep this game close, they're going to have to contain Fields. And if you look historically between these two teams, the last several meetings, these games have been within single digits and usually within a score or under 7 points. So these games are typically close. I expect that to come this weekend, and I expect to pick up a point on everyone on here to make up some ground.
That's exactly right. When you're talking about season-long competition, when you do go against everybody else, you give yourself a chance to make up some ground. And in addition to that, I'm actually happy to hear somebody, in this case you, make a case for Penn State in this game, because it only increases the possibility that maybe we get an entertaining game between these two Big Ten foes on Saturday. So now that game is a lot more fun, knowing that somebody from our contest is on the side of Penn State in that one. With that in mind, we'll go back to Georgia at Kentucky on Saturday. We gave you our picks for this game against the spread a little earlier. Now let's talk about what to expect from a total points expectancy. Pretty low total here for Georgia and Kentucky. 42.5 is the number we're going to work on here. So as far as the over-under picks go, Mike, are you over or under the 42.5 for Georgia at Kentucky on Saturday?
It's too low, and Kirby wants to make a point. He's going to want to show it. Zamir White will score 2 rushing touchdowns in the last 5 minutes because they want to show everybody that their offense is better than you think. So I got Georgia covering that spread and going with the over.
So Mike takes the over right there. Jeff Sintel, how about you? Over, under 42.5 for Georgia and Kentucky.
I can't see Georgia winning this one 42.5 to nothing or 41-3. I can't see any of that. I can't see it. I see this as a 35-7, 35-0, 31-7 type ball game. Comfortable, move, survive, and advance. I'm going to take the under on this one.
So Jeff going under on this one for Saturday, obviously expecting these two defenses to show up. Connor Riley, what about you? Over, under 42.5?
I am also taking the under here because this Kentucky offense is that bad. They had less than 100 yards of total offense going into the fourth quarter last week against Missouri. And that Missouri defense prior to that game hadn't shown to be all that good. I think this is a get-right game for the Georgia defense. I think Kentucky's going to get shut out again. That Eddie Grant offense, I know Mike is very fond of that there. I've got this game 31-0 Georgia, and that is a clear under there. So
it is also an under for Connor Riley here. Dog Nation Daily audience, 58% take the under. Georgia's not the automatic under for me. They were, as recently as a couple weeks ago, where I think we all kind of rubber stamp under on Georgia every single time. I'm not heavy on the over here, Dari. I would probably stay away from this if I, weren't doing this as part of our contest. But here's the theory I typically operate on. When you're talking about covering a relatively sizable number, and Georgia's a 15-point favorite, it's not a small number necessarily. It's a little bit of a tricky math proposition. And you said before you might take a prop bet on a Georgia shutout, and if that's the way you feel, then certainly more power to you. But the odds certainly favor covering a 15-point number, also going over kind of a 42 number to get there. So, I love your idea of a shutout, but barring a shutout, you kind of need some points to cover more than a 2-touchdown number. So I'll put a slight, nod on the over here, but the under is still the consensus. Do you want to go with the flow and take the under for Georgia and Kentucky?
I'm going with the flow. I like the under a lot in this game. Like I said earlier, I don't think Kentucky's going to be able to score. But if you want to get a little frisky on this, I would do a prop bet on shutting out Kentucky. I would also take a prop bet to hedge to see what the odds are that Georgia covers the 42.5 points by themselves.
Wow.
I don't think that's going to happen. I don't think they're going to be able to do that in this game. But new quarterback, turnovers, defensive touchdown. I'm smelling some stuff like that, which maybe if you want to hedge and you may be able to get a really good odds on that, that could be worth playing and make it really interesting as well.
I think that's really fun to think about here. I just know this, and Dory, I'm sure you feel the same way. Nice to have Georgia football back after a week off. I know there are a lot of UGA fans who are eager to see this team play again and show that it's better than what it showed in the second half against the game against Alabama. It's a very interesting stretch with Florida to follow the following week and then a run towards the end of the regular season. Getting that started again on Saturday is certainly going to be a lot of fun.
Yeah, looking forward to it. Can't wait to fire up the smoker and get some good meats on there this Saturday.
I'll be on my way to Lexington, so I'll have to only hear about the good food that Daria will be serving up. But for those of you who plan on being at home this weekend, if some last-minute issue comes to pass, if your water heater goes out, don't forget in many cases, RS Andrews can replace that for you the same day. It's a part of the great, unparalleled service they provide. Story after story, they've been delivering smiles, and they can deliver a smile for you, but you need to find them online at rsandrews.com. So best of luck with all of your picks. Enjoy the games here this weekend. Dory, I look forward to talking to you next week as well.
Yeah, definitely. Go Dogs.
And to everybody else, enjoy the Dogs as well. We'll talk to you next Friday once again on Go with the Flow, presented by RS Andrews.